All right. Oh, and here comes the Better Business Bureau anyways. So then as an organization becomes more mature, you certainly have expected that your board will have let go of more and more things. You're working on the organization really becoming a sustainable organization. The board's roles are going to change. They might not volunteer as much. They still need to be engaged. But that's just how it changes. And then things to really watch for is once you've reached that mature stage of your organization, once it's grown, you've made some changes, is to manage the board not actually, or the organization not actually becoming a stagnant organization. And so maybe, looking at how do you continue to keep those board members engaged with what's going on, because maybe if they've been around a little while, they were used to having that hands-on, they maybe felt like that they were really making a difference with the organization, and as they've let go, maybe they don't feel like that they've had as much of an impact. And then there's that defunct, which we hope that none of us actually get to, where the board actually dissolves because the organization's dissolved. So this is looking at the growth cycle for an organization is really, really important in first assessing the board's performance. And then I'm going to move on to the next slide, I think. Can you all still see that okay? So assessing board performance is the most effective way to make sure that your board understands what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be doing it, making sure that they are practicing good governance for the organization. And can I ask a question? And this comes directly from BoardSource, which I'm a certified board governance trainer through BoardSource, but do all of you have a governance committee? Jackie says no.
But we have a board meeting this Friday, and the formation of a governance committee is on it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And I did not get to meet whoever is on from the Better Business Bureau. I know I have Ellen on with Choose Marshall County, but who do I have on with the Better Business Bureau?
I'm muted. I'm Amanda Otto. I'm with Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Oh, Big Brothers Big Sisters. Oh, I knew that. Sorry about that. I saw BBB okay. And I'm thinking Better Business Bureau.
I know. I noticed that and I was like, I need to probably change that title, but no.
What was your first name again? Amanda.
Amanda. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. And to answer your question, we do have a board governance committee.
Okay, good.
So
good. That seems to be one of the committees that's lacking within a lot of nonprofit organizations, and they generally don't understand what that governance committee is supposed to be doing.
Can you explain that to me, what the difference is? A governance board or a governance
committee?
Part of your board? Yeah.
A governance committee.
Is that? I thought that was within the board, or the board was already doing that. So explain to me what the difference is.
So in ideal committee structure, a nonprofit organization should have a governance committee. It should be one of those main committees that they have as part of the board. And the governance committee really, they have a lot of work to do, because some people think, well, the governance committee is looking at the bylaws once a year to see if they need updated. But really the governance committee's role is to not only do that work, but generally they take the role on of succession planning for the board, handling board nominations, kind of help facilitating the board elections. They help lead the way for board assessments, for board development, for CEO assessment. And so there's a lot of work throughout the year that a governance committee really should be responsible for, helping to create succession plans for the CEO. So that's all work that a governance committee ideally will do. Some organizations, they form a nominating committee for a few months to help do the nominations and create a slate of board members and or officers for the organization. But I encourage organizations as a best practice to actually have a governance committee that does that and so many other things. And I have a calendar of really what an annual year looks like for a governance committee and all the things that they can and should be responsible for. You have something like that, Ellen?
No, we don't. In the past, the director has just done those things. But I am telling them when I'm going to retire. So I think that would be a good idea. Could I have that calendar you're talking about?
I will send out that governance calendar.
Okay, thank you.
And I can just tell you, it's very easy for a board to just push a lot of the board's roles and responsibilities off on the director, the executive director, and or other staff. But the work that I just talked about, that is board roles and responsibilities. Those are not responsibilities of the director. But they have to be trained right. I have this theory, and I know Jackie's heard this several times, that people, when they get on a nonprofit board, they don't know anything about serving on a nonprofit board, and they learn from that nonprofit board what nonprofit board service should look like. Even if that board is functionally dysfunctional, then they have the perception that, oh, that's how things should be, when in fact they aren't. And then they take that to another nonprofit board, that knowledge that they've acquired about dysfunctional boards, and assume that that's how boards should all operate. I'm trying to fix that one board at a time. All right, moving on. Well, I'm gonna get there. Oops. I'm so sorry. This is so clunky because I'm used to being on my computer at work and I'm on a laptop. So then let's talk a little bit about the board performance and the board assessment. So the actual board assessment, where you actually assess your board, really looks at what is the selection and composition of the board. So that includes things such as, how many people do you have serving on your board? What are your different roles that you have on the board? Do you have diversity on your board, or is everybody on your board social workers? So it kind of looks at that selection and composition of the board. It also looks at and assesses whether or not you're doing, or your organization is doing, board orientation and onboarding new board members correctly. And are they doing board development training so boards can improve and they can learn more about serving on nonprofit boards? It looks at the structure and the organization of the board. Also looks at the board at work. So what work is the board doing? What work is the board not doing because it's being pushed off on somebody else, or because they don't really understand what their roles and responsibilities are in doing that work. And it really kind of helps to identify, then, if you've got issues in some of these areas, what kind of board development needs to be done in order for the board to improve their performance. So we're going to take a look at these tools. And again, I know some of this text is going to be kind of small, but I wanted to review these tools with you because I'm going to be sending these tools out for you to potentially use with your boards. And so we're going to go to the first one, which is an annual board assessment. And the annual board assessment, of course, preferably would be done annually. Oh my. Okay. So we're going to look at this annual board assessment, and I would I would invite you, if you have a piece of paper handy, to go through this process with me, just from your perception of what the board is doing. And let's as executive directors, or whatever our role is, let's assess where we think the board, how we think our board is actually performing. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go through each of these questions, and I'm going to ask you to put a 0. No, this does not exist on the board. 1, we are working on it. Or 2, yes, we are in great shape on this item. Because this is what I would have you or your governance committee, if they wanted to implement a board assessment, this is what I would have them do in order so they could review the results and see how the board as a whole perceives how the board is doing. So number 1, our board is composed of persons vitally interested in the work. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a template. So of WFCC, or whatever your organization is.
Do you mean for work, do you mean like mission and vision, or do you mean like the everyday work?
The everyday work. Are they interested in the work? Are they interested in the work the organization's doing overall?
For me, that sounds a little bit more like mission and vision.
Okay. Number 2, our board is representative of our community with regard to race, gender, and the public and private sector. Number 3, there's a balance of new and experienced board members to guarantee both continuity and a new perspective. This is really looking at, do you have board terms in place, and are you having regular turnover as they should be as they serve out their terms? Gosh, I wish that would quit doing that. Okay, board members have the combination of skills, which I teach, and I know Jackie knows this, I teach on an ongoing basis, having a variety of skills, strengths, and experience. So board members have the combination of skills, management, fundraising, legal, fiscal, other skills necessary to work towards the mission. There is a limit to the number of consecutive terms a board member serves. Do you all have board terms? The organization keeps a pool of potential board members identified for the future. This is something the governance committee would be working on, possibly. The organization develops future board members through the use of volunteers on committees. And new board members are recruited and selected in a standard system of review. So do you have some kind of standard system for how you evaluate potential new board members and select new board members? All right, total up your scores. I'm curious what you got.
I got 7.
You got 7?
Yeah.
Amanda, did you score? Ellen, did you score?
I'm pretty close to the 7 place
The
too.
7?
Yeah.
So probably have a little bit of work to do here then, from your perception. The board might perceive things differently, but from your perception. All right, this part has to do with selection and composition. We're going to go to the next part, which has to do with orientation and training. Are you ready? There's a commitment form outlining the responsibilities of board members that all board members sign. So they have you have some kind of form that they sign so they understand what their responsibilities are. The board members understand their legal liability. I'm surprised at the number of board members that don't understand that they're legally and financially responsible for a nonprofit organization. Anyways, the organization provides a comprehensive orientation for all new members. Does everybody have an orientation in place? The organization provides all board members with a board manual, which at a minimum includes board member roles and responsibilities, descriptions of current programs, budget and funding reports, bylaws, and personal and financial management policies. And then organization makes learning opportunities available to board members to increase skills related to their board responsibilities. So how are you all doing on orientation and training? Your perception?
2.5.
2.5. Okay, got some work to do, right?
I think one of the things that happened in our situation is we have a lot of the same board members because they're investors to be a board member. And so we keep a lot of the same ones year after year, and they already understand a lot of this. And so we haven't really felt the need to have, a board manual type of thing. However, when we do have new people come on, that's a really good idea. So we probably need to step that up.
I think the danger in what you're telling me in not having board members regularly turn over, and all board members should give to the organization financially, that's one of their obligations, is that eventually those board members, they don't live forever. And so continually bringing new people on, so you have new money, so you have new ideas, so the organization can consider change, is really important for a nonprofit organization.
I can agree with you there.
Yep. Okay, so that looked at orientation and training. Looks like there's maybe a little bit of work to do there. And then let's look at the structure and the organization of the board. Are you ready? The board has a set of bylaws that describes the duties of board members and officers and the procedures by which the board conducts its business. The board has a mechanism for handling matters that must be addressed between meetings. The board elects a chair to provide leadership and coordinate the ongoing work of the board and its committees. The board has active committees with specific responsibilities. Committee assignments are reviewed and evaluated periodically. The working relationship between the board chair and the executive director is strong and productive. And board and staff members are clear on their respective responsibilities. So the relationship between the board and staff is built on mutual respect and good rapport. So what's your perceptions of how your board is doing in this area of structure and organization?
I think we're doing pretty good on this one. I'd give us a 12.
Oh, good. Good. Amanda?
I gave us a 14 on this one. I think we're pretty
Good.
Yep.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm on 14 too. Some of them scored a little bit lower because we have some turnover and revamping that we're doing, but I think we're on our way.
Good to hear that. All right. I know this is the board at work and it's a little bit longer, but the work that the board does is really important to assess that work as well. So you got your pencils ready? There are regularly scheduled board meetings at least 3 times a year. Meetings begin and end on time according to an agreed upon schedule. Does everybody do well with that? Yeah, my board sometimes struggles with that.
We have
Our board
more than
does.
one.
Do what?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say our board does good with that, but it does get a little frustrating sometimes because our board meetings are set for 60 minutes. And if we're on minute 59 and there's still some things to be discussed, they start to get fidgety and they don't like to go over that 60-minute time period. So I like the schedule, but there are a few meetings a year that we probably need to put to 90 minutes. So
Sure. So
So
is
you
there a
We
quorum
block
present?
really long
Oh, sorry.
time per- We block really long time periods, and so we get it all done.
There is a quorum present at all board meetings. There is adequate preparation and distribution of material, including agendas, financial reports, etc., in advance of the meetings. So is all that stuff going out to the board the day before, the week before? Do they have time to read it? Are they reading it? Board meetings are characterized by open discussions, general participation, and active thinking. So are they having good discussion? Are people participating? Board members deal primarily with policy formulation, financial and long-range planning, financial review, and evaluating the work of the organization. Minutes of board and committee meetings are written and circulated to the board members. Committees are active and complete assigned tasks in a timely manner. This means you don't have some of those committees that are supposed to be doing things, and every board meeting they came back and say, we haven't gotten around to that yet. I see that happen. The board makes governance decisions based on evaluation data presented annually. The board stays aware of the community, state, and national matters that could affect the organization. Individual board members accept and carry out assignments within the area of their talents and expertise. Board members accomplish their commitments in a timely manner. Board members make a generous financial contribution, self-defined, to the organizational annual basis. All board members are actively involved in some aspect of fundraising. All board members. Board members are actively promoting the organization. The board conducts an annual review of its own organization and work. And new leadership is emerging consistently from the board and its committees. So how did you all do on the board at work?
Got 20 for this.
Okay,
I would give us a 22.
okay, good.
we're at 24.
Okay, good. So that is all of that particular assessment. And what I would love for you all to do, or challenge you to do, I guess, is when I send this particular evaluation out, this board assessment out, is hang on to your responses. See if you can get your board to participate in this assessment. And whose role would it be to actually get the board to do this?
It should be the board's role.
You are correct, Jackie. It would be the board's role, and or the governance committee could take that on. The executive committee could take it on, but it's really not necessarily the executive director's role to conduct the board assessment. But it would be interesting if you all decide to conduct a board assessment, or your board decides to conduct a board assessment, to compare your perceptions with the scores that you have with what all of your board responds. There's a couple of different ways that you can, when I send this out, you could make copies, the board could make copies, you could distribute this assessment. It looks a little bit different than this on the form that I'll send you. You could distribute this assessment, have them all do it, have somebody compile the responses, and then have a discussion at a board meeting about, what the overall assessment looks like for the performance of the board as a whole. Some organizations like to create something like a Survey Monkey or some other kind of survey that can be done online, so nobody knows what each board member responded, or something about that privacy and people being open and honest to what their responses are. But when I send this stuff out to you, again, would challenge the board to look at doing an assessment and doing, even though it says annual, and I would encourage annually, around the same time they do that CEO assessment to also assess the performance of the board. I would just encourage that because it gives you an opportunity every year to look at how your board is performing. So the next thing is we've looked at how do we assess the performance of the overall board. And really, I can tell you that that assessment that we looked at is really based on the roles and responsibilities of board members. So it's looking at, are they actually doing the things that they're supposed to be doing as a board? And again, I mentioned earlier that sometimes it's easy for boards to push a lot of things off onto the executive director or the staff, either because they think they don't have time, they don't want to commit to that, or whatever the reason is. Maybe it's just because they just don't really understand what their roles are. So the next thing that I would want an organization to look at is the individual board member performance. And we also will go through a self-assessment. This will be a little bit different because this would be a board member evaluating their own performance, so not the board as a whole. And it's going to look at things like attendance and whether or not they're actually attending the board meetings like they should be, whether they're attending and participating in a committee like they should be, whether they're participating in events that you have, whether that's fundraising events or other events that you might need them to participate in, whether that's networking events that you might need them to get out and go to try to create awareness of the organization. It's going to look at whether or not they are supportive of resource development. That's tied to fundraising, of course. And then what is their overall commitment to the organization? So let's go over this tool. You all have any questions? Okay, so this individual board member assessment is going to look at these questions. And I'm not going to have you all answer these questions because this is a little bit different than you assessing the board from your perception as a whole, unless you just want to kind of, answer what you think the board member, a particular board member might answer. But, we'd ask a board member to be really open and honest about responding to these questions. So do they understand and support the mission of the organization? Yes, they do. No, they don't, or they're really not sure. And I've been surprised sometimes at some of the board members that I've met over the years that really are unsure what the mission of an organization even is. So hopefully all your board members understand that. Am I sufficiently knowledgeable about the organization's programs and services? So it's important for board members to be able to talk intelligently about what the organization's doing if they're out there in the community, and or if they're going to make decisions on behalf of the organization, they need to know what kind of programs and services is the organization offering, who are they serving, those types of things. Do I follow trends and important developments related to the organization? So what's going on out in the world that they really need to be following themselves? And of course, the executive director can help them follow some of those trends, and provide some of the insight on trends that are going on in a certain industry. But it's important for them to stay up to date with those things. Do I assist with fundraising through personal outreach to cultivate donors and or acknowledge individual gifts? So I know Jackie's heard this many times, but it is the entire board's role to be involved in fundraising in some way, shape, or form, and to be involved in showing appreciation for those donations that have come in, whether that's sitting at a board meeting, writing thank you notes during a board meeting for the latest list of donors, whether that's calling somebody and just saying, I really appreciate your donation. And then whether it's helping to find sponsorships or whatever, there's a lot of ways that boards can get involved in fundraising, and not everybody has to be the person that makes the big ask for $10,000 or $20,000, and nor should they be, but they all do need to be involved in cultivating and acknowledging gifts. Do I give a significant inner stretch gift to the organization? Now I'm curious, do each of you define how much your board members have to give annually? Jackie says no. Amanda or Ellen?
We do not. We just require some type of monetary donation.
Yep. Good, good.
We have a situation where our investors who give $1,000 a year have a seat on the board.
Uh-huh.
So generally, but then you can be a business member for $100 a year.
Okay. All righty. And it's okay whether you define that or whether you don't, but everybody does need to try to give something to the organization. Do I stay informed about the organization's financial health and take an active part in reviewing, approving, and monitoring financial information? You'd probably be surprised the number of board members that'll say, well, I'm not really sure that I really dig into the financials very much, but they do need to be educated about what's going on financially with the organization and be able to understand the financial statements. Do I have a good working relationship? Oops. Do I have a good working relationship with the chief executive? Do I recommend individuals for service to the board? So it is the board's role to recruit new board members. That's not the executive director's role. It's not the staff's role. It is board members' role. And so are they actually doing, did they understand that that's their role, and are they doing it? Do I prepare for and participate in board meetings and committee meetings? And I like this prepare for. Participation is one thing, but are they reading all the reports prior that they get? Or do they actually come to the board meetings having read the reports and understand what questions they ought to be asking? This is something that sometimes I see people say, well, they maybe don't really do that, but they need to. Do I participate in partner visits and other events? There's lots of ways that board members can do that. And then looking at the last few questions, do I invite others to participate in events? So they should, whether it's fundraising events, fundraiser events, other things that the organization does. It is the board's role to invite others to participate and get to know about the organization. And do I act as a goodwill ambassador for the organization, actively promote it? Do I open doors and make introductions to my personal and professional network? That's part of a big role for board members, to make those introductions and help to open the doors, especially for the executive director. Do I provide pro bono services to the organization? So if they know how to do graphic design, or if they have some other skill, do they actually offer up those skills and maybe do some of that stuff pro bono? Do I find serving on the board to be satisfying and rewarding? Do I attend at least 75% of the board meetings during the year? Do any of you all have board members that struggle with getting to at least 75% of your board meetings? Yes. I find the bigger the board, the more issue that this happens to be. And I also find that organizations struggle with addressing the issue of board members who repeatedly don't show up. And I'm pretty harsh about that, because I've served as a board chair with a number of organizations on a number of nonprofit boards. And of course, it is my role as a board chair for those organizations to address that issue and not just let it continue and continue, because that person that's not showing up, that's not participating, then they're taking the seat of somebody who potentially could. And I know that one of the boards that I serve on, I recently reached out to a board member. We meet every other month. We hadn't seen the board member, and I tried to get the previous board chair to do this, and he was a bit skittish. And so I, as board chair, reached out and said, look, you agree to participate in 90% of the board meetings. We haven't seen you in the past year. And so I just want to remind you that it is our obligation that if you don't participate in the board meetings, and we certainly understand if you can't participate, if something's come up or whatever, but that we are obligated to according to our bylaws, to remove you from the board. He was at the next board meeting, so we'll see. We'll see. We hadn't seen him in a year. And, I think as it is my role as board chair to do that. And I think some board chairs don't know, or they put it off on the executive director. It isn't the executive director's role. The board chair oversees the board, and it's their role to do that. What can the organization do to make my board service more productive and satisfying? So this is an open-ended question. You need to know, the board needs to know, the organization needs to know if they're not engaged, if they're not attending, if their board service isn't interesting, if it's not engaging, what needs to change for that to happen? And I know I talked to a young professional a couple of years ago that said, I serve on this nonprofit board and I don't do anything but go to meetings and listen to the executive director talk. And I don't really understand the purpose of me being there. And really it boiled down to that particular board member didn't understand what his roles and responsibilities were on the board. He didn't understand what he was supposed to be doing. So that's important thing for them to look at. And then what could I do to make my board service more productive and satisfying? So sometimes it is just the board member that is just going to the meetings. They're not paying attention. They're not reading things ahead of time. They're not looking at how they can offer up something to improve. So it's important for them to look at that as well. So again, I'll send you out this document. I think it's a fantastic document that you give to your board members, or maybe the board governance committee, the board chair, whoever is going to take responsibility for that, gives this at the same time they do the board assessment. Or maybe they do it in the middle of the year, in the middle of a term, something like that. But I think this is good self-reflection for that board member, and them to be able to have a discussion with and think about how can they do better. Any questions about that? All right. So the important thing about either one of those things, but certainly that board member, that individual board assessment, is it allows some correction to happen. If they're not engaged, let's explore how we get that board member engaged. If they're not participating, what are the steps to correct that? And then back to that self-reflection. I had a board member that when my board went through this, they did the individual board assessment a few years ago. I had a board member that came to me afterwards and said, I realized after I took this assessment, I know this identifies what my roles and responsibilities are, and 90% of them I'm not doing. And so how can I do better? It's good for them to recognize that maybe they could do better as a board member. So what do we do after that? We have another tool that I'm going to discuss with you, which is an engagement plan. And it is a really good follow-up for that individual board member performance for you to review. So we're going to review that. And hopefully, I do really hope that these tools that I send out to you will come in helpful for you doing assessments for your own organization. All right, so let's look at, thanks, Ellen. Let's look at this. So here's a board engagement plan. This is a template. You can update this in whatever way that you want to, that aligns with what your requirements are, what's in your board agreement. So, but this allows a board member to reflect on what they've just said and then step back and figure out how will they commit to engaging with the organization. So they can put in, you've got this column on the left. So actively participating. Maybe that means they will commit to attending all the board meetings. Maybe they want to put in here, I'm going to commit to attending 90% of the board meetings. I've only been attending 50%, but I am willing to commit to myself and to the organization. I'll do 90%. I'm going to commit to being active on at least one task force, one committee, participating in planning an event, whatever it is. These are just samples here in the middle section of what they could write, but you really have to kind of leave it open to them to what is it that they are willing to do. So I will guarantee the future and financial health of the organization by doing what? So maybe they'll commit to making a personal stretch gift. Maybe they say, I'm going to commit to making a gift of, $500 a year or whatever. Whatever it is, that commitment that they want to make. And then, and another example might mean they'll contribute to the financial health. They'll contribute to the financial health by making leadership and fundraising a priority and helping to actively cultivate. Maybe that means making invitations to other people to participate in the organization, inviting them to fundraisers, making introductions to the executive director or the development director, whatever that looks like that they're willing to do. This is their commitment for what they're willing to do. And then the other things are, they can guarantee the future and financial health of the organization by acting as an ambassador, leveraging their credibility to speak publicly at the United Way or some other organization, the Lions Club, a church, I don't know. Again, these are all just examples. I don't want to read them all to you, but it will give you an idea of some of the ways that they can guarantee the future and the financial health of the organization. I like some of these about regularly introducing donors, helping to recruit board members, leveraging relationships with public official, maybe that's the media, maybe it's potential funder, but committing to using their relationships to help further the organization. And then last, I will engage in and perpetuate the vitality of the board. So maybe they're willing to commit to an orientation, participating in an orientation. All my board members have to go through an orientation. It takes them about an hour and a half, but it's good information, and they don't come in and are blindsided by what's going on with our organization. They're familiar with our financials, our bylaws, all of the expectations, how much they have to get. Maybe they commit to participating in an annual board retreat. Hopefully your board participates in an annual retreat. I am working with the organization right now that I'm getting ready to do strategic planning, and they don't want any of their board participating because the board's never participated in strategic planning, which I found it a little odd, because the board is legally and financially responsible for the organization. They should be participating in that strategic planning. Maybe they'll commit to participating in self-assessments every year, or that overall board assessment, or volunteering for the organization. So whatever it is, you want them to look at what it is they are doing and what it is that they're willing to commit to doing moving forward. Any questions about that? Do these seem like useful tools? Yes. All right, we're going to look at one more. I think it's just one more regarding the assessment of the board meetings overall. And I know I've talked about consent agendas in the past. We'll talk about consent agendas again. And do any of you use consent agendas?
We do.
Okay, good. So I like a board to use a consent agenda for all of their reports, maybe their minutes, even financials if they can, so they can focus more of their time on talking about things that are strategic going on on the organization. So many boards have fallen into the trap of just spending a board meeting reporting out on what all the committees are doing, and they never get around to any strategic discussion. The board really needs to have that strategic discussion on an ongoing basis. Maybe that includes taking a few minutes to review the strategic plan to make sure that you all are following a strategic plan that you have in place. And really, that committee meeting work that happens, that's where a lot of your work happens with your board, is at the committee level. But really, they only need to bring forward those things that are important for the board to know as a whole and get updates or feedback on. So I doubt that, you know, if your board event committee or development committee who's planning your upcoming event needs to report out to the whole board, we haven't decided whether we want gold napkins and tablecloths or not. That's not a board decision. The committee can make that recommendation. So yes, Jackie.
So I think what our board thinks a consent agenda is and what it actually is might be different things. So
Uh-huh.
it sounds like what you're describing is like all the just regular reporting would be consolidated before the meeting and available. And so that, yeah, I don't have to spend my time saying, well, these are all the things I did at the sanctuary this year. I can just say, you read it. You have any questions?
That is correct, Jackie. So
Okay.
they should be able to receive those reports prior to the board meeting and read all those reports and have an idea if they have any particular questions. And that's part of their obligation of being prepared for the board meetings, is reading those reports prior. But they don't all need to be discussed at a board meeting. That's taking away from strategic discussion on things that are important. Those are things that, you know, have already happened and we don't need to rehash them at the board meeting. We don't need to rehash everything that happened at committee meeting. So that allows the board to engage more and actually be involved in making strategic decisions and having strategic discussions instead of just listening to a bunch of reports. So this board meeting evaluation that I'm going to show you, and I actually serve on a board that they do this every time. And so I'm going to show you this. I wouldn't recommend that you necessarily conduct this board meeting evaluation form every time you have a board meeting, but maybe a couple of times a year, you could go through this process. So this board meeting evaluation form, and I think this is good to assess from time to time, kind of looks at as the board members came to the board meeting, was the agenda focused on issues that have long-term importance and supported by the necessary documents that they needed to read? Were the meeting materials circulated in sufficient time prior to the meeting? So if you've got a bunch of reports and you're sending out your board minutes and agenda and your reports 2 hours before the board meeting, they probably didn't have enough time to read through those. Best practice is generally to try to send them out at least 5 days prior and encourage them to read them. All board members were prepared to discuss materials sent in advance. What is their perception of that now? Do all board members seem like they were prepared? Do some not have any idea what we're discussing because they haven't read anything? Reports were clear and contained the needed information that those board members needed. They avoided getting into administrative or management details. So they don't need to get in on to the day-to-day things, Jackie or anybody else, of what's going on with the organization, unless there's some major crisis that's going on with their organization. They don't need to get into whatever discussion that you had with your administrative assistant because she's not behaving properly. That's for you to take care of. I just use that as an example. I hope you all don't think Jackie has issues with her admin.
No, she left the organization.
Oh, she left. Well, maybe there was issues. Sorry about that, Jackie. A diversity of opinions were expressed and issues were dealt with in a respectful manner. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a board meeting where there was some disrespect. There's some tension between some of the board members. So it's important to have that respect in a board meeting, as well as a sense of humor for what's going on and the ability to even if you don't totally agree, if the board votes, in a majority way, that you go along with what that is. The chair guided the meeting effectively, and that generally includes, they also got you out on time, because that's the board chair's role to make sure that happens. Members participated responsibly. Next steps were identified and responsibility was assigned. So everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. What's their challenge, between now and the next board meeting or committee meeting. A substantial majority of board members were present. That's always really important. The meeting began and ended on time. The meeting room was conducive to work, so you didn't have, kids in the background running amok when you couldn't hear anything or something like that. And then lastly, I'm glad I came. It was worthwhile use of my time. And if they're not glad that they came and they felt like it wasn't a worthwhile use of their time, you all really need to assess as a board what's going on with the board meetings, that board members are feeling like this was a waste of my time. I sat here for the last hour, or hour and a half, or 2 hours, or whatever the board meeting is, and I'm just leaving here frustrated. So this is a good tool to use. Again, there are organizations that use it after every board meeting. I think that's a lot of work, but I think using it, here and there, once a quarter, assessing a board meeting, being able to regroup, see where you're doing, I think it's a great tool. Okay, so then we're going to talk a little bit about the core competencies of nonprofit CEOs. And I'm just curious, and Alice, welcome. Good to have you here today. So as we talk through some of these core competencies of nonprofit CEOs, can I just ask you all honestly, do all of you, are you all evaluated by your board? Do you get that annual assessment?
I was evaluated this year, but I think it was the first year they ever evaluated their CEO.
I hear that.
Our CEO evaluation happens every year on around the hire date.
Okay, good. Anybody else? So really your core competencies of nonprofit CEOs are planning for the organization, the programs, the services, whatever other planning that happens to make things happen within the organization. Fundraising, that's a core competency because every executive director, CEO, whatever, has to in some way be involved with fundraising. Even if you have a development director, they have to be involved in fundraising. Overall administration for the organization, certainly managing those board relations, whether it's not just the board chair, because that's a big role in having a good relationship with the board chair, but the overall board relations and handling all the different things that you might have to deal with the board. Communications and public relations, that's a hat that we all wear as well. And then certainly the financial management of the organization. So these are some of the core competencies as you're evaluated that your board really needs to be looking at. How are you doing along these core competencies? And then how is the performance review of somebody who works in the corporate world different from somebody who works in the nonprofit world? It's important because so often we have people that are serving on boards, and I might be one of the exceptions because we are the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. So our board is a combination of people from nonprofit organizations and people from the business sector because we have to have voices of both. But we as nonprofit organizations generally have a little bit more limited funding to go out and just hire whoever we want to for whatever many hours that we want to. We're much more limited in doing that. And maybe we have staff that's part-time that we really would like to have full-time, but really don't have the funding to have them full-time. So, when you're getting an evaluation, the board is conducting that. They need to understand that they can't compare your performance to that of somebody who has all the resources imaginable in order to run the organization. They also have to realize that we're handling multiple roles. We wear lots and lots of hats within these organizations, especially for a small to medium organization. I know sometimes I'm even emptying the trash where I work. I might be running the vacuum. There's lots of different things that we have to do that maybe don't always compare to somebody that's a CEO in the corporate world. And then there's can be that lack of stability and predictability with the things that go on. And some of that ties back to the fact that we just don't always have the same resources and stuff that a for-profit business might have. We have to be flexible and that means sometimes we're there really late at night when we don't want to be. Staff is sick, a fundraising event is happening, something goes wrong. We are constantly have to be flexible in the work that we do. We often don't have the same types of benefits as that for-profit CEO might have. And for most of us, I don't know about you, but our motivation is different. So I don't go to work every day doing the job that I do for the money. I certainly don't do it for the money. I have a master's degree in international business. I live in a city that's a lot manufacturing. I could go out and work for lots of different companies and probably make 2 or 3 times the money that I make. But I'm motivated to help nonprofit organizations. That's what drives me. So I settle for less money and all these other things in order to be able to do the work that I love to do. For me, it's just not all about the money. All right. And then I have this little cartoon I just throw in here about CEO performance evaluation because it's kind of fun. I don't have time to write performance reviews, so I'll just criticize you in public from time to time. I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with board members or a board chair that, you know, they don't ever do that evaluation, but they do make a point of occasionally criticizing you for what you do. Or maybe they do an evaluation and they dump their whole year of criticism off on you during that evaluation because none of it's been addressed during the year. So just a little cartoon that's more real than I really want it to be. So when they do, when your board does an evaluation of you, you guys can go out and you ladies can go out and share this with your board. They need to base your evaluation on concrete goals. So whatever goals were set last year, your performance needs to be evaluated on how you actually completed those goals. And I'm not just talking about, well, your goal was to, I don't know, bring in, 20 new members, but having SMART goals, they need to be able to have SMART goals that they can measure. So they're very specific. They're measurable. You need to bring in 20 new members by December 31st or whatever those concrete goals are. They need to be conducting your evaluation based on that. They need to incorporate in your evaluation whatever the organizational values are. So what's important for the organization? Are you incorporating those values into all the work that you do? Are those flowing throughout the organization? Are you helping with that? It is good for board members to be able to provide input, the whole board, on how an executive director is doing. And I know our organization does that with a survey that's sent out to board members. The board members can answer those questions and then they compile that information from all the board members. And they also ask for input from staff, because the thing about board members is their perceptions are from what they see at the board meetings or the committee meetings that we participate in often. They're not there on a day-to-day basis to see how we do, how we handle stress, whether we're mean to staff or not mean to staff. They just don't see what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I know I had somebody on my board several years ago that I was a part-time executive director when I first came on, and I was supposed to be working 25 hours a week and was often working 45, and I'm involved in other things. And that board member said, well, if you'd quit being involved in any other things, you'd have more time for the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. Well, the problem with that is they're only paying me for 25 hours a week and I'm working 40 or 45. So I really didn't need to commit more time to the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. So it's important to have feedback from not just one board member, not just the board chair, but a wide variety of opinions from what their perceptions are from the board members and the staff. And then if you don't do a self-assessment, I think that's equally as important, that you provide a self-assessment of your own performance, as well as you offer up potential goals that you would like to achieve for the next year between now and your next evaluation. And I think that's important for that to be provided before the board creates your evaluation or the final evaluation that they're going to sit down and have with you. So you can give them some insight as to one of the things that you're doing. I know I went through a leadership program this last year, and I just had my assessment. And some of the feedback was, kudos for going through that leadership program. We didn't even know you were doing that. And my response was, well, I told you at the first of the year that I was going through this leadership program, but I give you a lot of information, so I don't expect that you'll remember everything that I give you. But so that came out in my self-assessment. Otherwise, they probably still wouldn't have known that I did that leadership program. And then provide the board with an overview of the process. So teach them. You may have to teach them what the process should look like, who should be in charge, who should participate, all those different things. And then ultimately, generally the board chair should sit down and do that actual evaluation with you. Does your process work like this for those of you who have evaluation? You got any thoughts about this?
Our process is pretty similar to this.
Good.
Personally, I have a hard time with self-assessments. I
Yes.
struggle with that. So,
Yes.
but our board is so far been supportive of that. And, we get to go over it as after I submit the actual written assessment. So
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Self-assessment is hard for me as well. I have a hard time talking about and even thinking about the successes that I may have had over the past year. So I totally get that. Okay, so I already mentioned that the board chair conducts the actual evaluation. They should review the results with the CEO and then develop those action plans, not only action plans, but actually identify some shared goals that they can agree on. So I may have some goals that I think we should achieve. My board may have a different perception of some of the goals that I need to achieve. We need to work that out together so I can understand what those goals are. It's good for them to focus on what's going well and what can be improved. Avoid surprises. So it's important for that board chair not to, again, just dump a whole bunch of stuff on you that hasn't been discussed throughout the year. So you're in shock that they're critical of something. And then they just need to avoid too much weight on other people's opinions, especially with external evaluations. And some organizations will invite other business leaders within the community or whatever to participate, people that maybe your partners or whatever. So we're going to look real quickly at this leadership performance evaluation for the nonprofit CEO. Maybe. Let me stop this. And I'm going to show you this, but it's a tool that I'm going to send you. But I'm not going to go over it step by step. And that's only if I can stop my share. So I have wait, I'm still not sharing it. You'd think I've been doing this Zoom thing for a couple of years now that I would get more smooth about it, but it doesn't happen. So I'm just going to send you all out, just so you know, a sample of a leadership performance evaluation for nonprofit CEOs, just so you have that as a tool in your toolbox that you could potentially share with your board. I don't know what tool you currently have. I know that there's a lot of them out there, but I really kind of like this because it's specifically targeted at those for small to mid-sized organizations. And it looks at the achievement of the goals from the last review period. It provides some things in regards to leadership that the board can actually evaluate you on. And then it has an overall, the management performance, and it actually measures the things that nonprofit EDs are often responsible for. Things that we talked about in that first slide when we were talking about this. And then the goals for the next review period and improvement plan and a development plan. So I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna discuss all this with you, but I just wanted you to be familiar with this tool that I'm gonna send out to you. So you have that as an example, and then oh my goodness. Give me a second. Sorry. The other thing that I'm going to send you out is really just an article that's on setting goals for the CEO that I think is a good tool for you to share with your board chair, your governance committee, your board members overall about doing, it's a step-by-step guide about doing some of these. So certainly you'll have the PowerPoint available that I send out to you, but I think sometimes having a handout, something that you can slip over to your board members and give them some guidance, and or maybe even for those who aren't getting evaluation, just a reminder of how they could potentially start that evaluation and some of the steps that they could take to make that evaluation happen. So I'm going to send this out to you as well, just as another tool. And then getting close to being done. Oh my goodness. You can't see that. Am I the only one that struggles still with going back and forth with Zoom? So as far as setting the goals, make sure that they focus on results that's linked to the vision overall, not just the mission of the organization, but how is that CEO, how is that executive director making progress to the overall huge vision for the organization? Because we have to always remember the mission work is the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. The vision work is where we want to be if we do that mission work correctly. It's good to have that strategic plan in place to be able to incorporate some of those strategic priorities and look at in regards to those goals. Is the CEO making progress? Is the organization making progress on achieving those strategic priorities? And then I like to tell board members when they're doing an evaluation, 3 key results, 3 goals, not 10. I got 7 this last time. And I kind of laughed to myself because some of them didn't really make sense, but I'm still working on my board and training them right. They're not perfect either. And so focus on those 3 goals, consider goals that are sustainable and balanced, and then identify other goals that, maybe want staff or the organization overall to accomplish. And then it's good to conduct an environmental scan. So what are the potential obstacles that could occur as you're trying to achieve the goals that the board has set for you? So, if your goal is to raise an extra $100,000 and we have a pandemic going on, that might not be a practical goal in this day and age. Or you might have to look at what are some of the other struggles that you might face. Maybe that would be an okay goal because we've got some ARPA funds coming out and all, so maybe there's an opportunity to get those. But I think it's just important to have a good environmental scan and make sure that everything is realistic. And then make sure that you clarify specific measurements. So how are you going to measure whether or not you've achieved those goals? The board needs to understand what that measurement's going to look like. If it's 20 new members by December 31st, then it needs to be written out like that. Otherwise to say, we want you to have 20 new members, period. Well, that might be in the next 5 years. You don't know. And the board needs to give us guidance on what it is that they expect from us. Otherwise, we're wandering around sometimes aimlessly, not really knowing whether or not we're doing the things that they want us to do. And then make sure you cascade and communicate the goals throughout the organization. So I sat down and I shared my goals that the board had set for me, my evaluation. And I talked through those goals and how to incorporate my staff overall as achieving those goals. Because there's certainly parts of those goals that tie into the work that they're doing. And while I might lead that, maybe I'm not actually doing some of that actual work. So it's important that the staff, the rest of the people within the organization, know what their role is in helping to achieve those goals as well. All right, and then it's important for follow-up to make sure that the board supports your future development. So if you need assistance with learning more about fundraising, if you need to know about sustainability, if you need to learn about planned giving, or you need help with learning more about accounting or keeping the books or whatever it is that you do, it's important for the board to understand that and try to find ways to help you gain those additional skills that you might need. And they can do that by investing in training or coaching. And I know sometimes that's hard because maybe you've got small budgets, but any way that they can find to do that, I think benefits the whole organization. Then they should be providing ongoing feedback to you on how things are, how they perceive things are going. And you should be able to provide ongoing feedback to them as well. And then the last thing I'm going to talk to you about real quickly, because this wasn't a main thing for this particular presentation, but making sure that you always have some sort of assessment in place, some sort of way that you're measuring the effectiveness of your programs and services so you can report back to your board on that. And these are just some things that you can communicate back to the board, whether or not you believe, whether or not they believe that what you're doing, everything that you're doing is continuing to align with the mission and vision. So you're not creating things that don't. The board members need to be curious and ask questions about what's going on with the programs and services and how they're doing, and whether or not you're serving the people that you're supposed to be serving. The CEO's role is to really inform and engage the board in all of those things without drawing them into micromanaging, because we don't ever want our boards micromanaging. Then keeping them updated on how the programs and services are developing, whether or not what you're doing is adequate, and whether or not you're actually excelling. So I'm going to give you one more tool. It's programmatic oversight that I'll send out to you. And it really has to do with creating a dashboard. And I don't know if any of you have ever used a dashboard for monitoring your programs and services, but I have heard some board members really like a dashboard that you can put together in an Excel spreadsheet that kind of identifies some different categories. What is your KPI? How are you going to measure whether or not you're doing well? And what as measurement as you evaluate, looking at what the percentage was. And these red and green just tell you, if things end up in the red category, you're really not meeting the target goal. If they're in the yellow, well, you should pay attention to whether or not, that just means caution. And green means you're doing really good in that area. So in this percentage regarding program performance, retention rate for an organization, say this looks like this was from a school, their last period was 88% retention, this period is 96%, you're doing well. You're doing really well in that area. So sometimes breaking it down for a board in that way to give them those assessments instead of giving out some huge long report that you expect them to read, is a better way of helping them to assess how you're doing with your programs and services. That is all I have, and it's a good thing because now I'm starting to cough. And I made it. What questions do you all have? comments, concerns, any other tools I can provide you with? Did I help you
Oh,
learn
I look-
anything?
Yeah, I look forward to sharing these tools with my board, and I appreciate your time as always.
Thank
Well,
you so much.
You're quite welcome. It was certainly a pleasure to have all you today. Even though I failed in not hitting record at the beginning, I will get this recording downloaded. And so like people like Alice that got in a little bit late, will have this presentation to be able to review the video as well. And certainly look for my email with all the documents that I shared with you today. And certainly let me know if there's anything else I can do to help. Thank you all.